Good evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. The time is 1 minute past 6 and I declare the ordinary council meeting open. Just making sure everyone's in their chairs. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Good evening, councillors, staff, ladies and gentlemen. We wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on, the Whadjuk people. We would like to pay respects to the elders of the Noongar Nation, past and present, who have walked and cared for the land, and we acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contributions made to the life of this city and this region, and I invite you to bow your heads in prayer. Lord, we ask for your blessing upon our city, our community, and our council. Guide us in our decision-making to act fairly, without fear or favour, and with compassion, integrity and honesty. May we show true leadership, be inclusive of all, and guide the City of Wanneroo to a prosperous future that all may share. We ask this in your name. Amen. Now, councillors, this is just another note to advise that the audio proceedings of tonight's meeting will be live broadcast online, with the exception of the matters discussed behind closed doors. That broadcast will remain available via the City website following the conclusion of the meeting. Item 1, attendances as per the record. Item 2 is apologies and leave of absence. We do have a leave of absence from Mayor Roberts, previously approved until the 21st of May 2022. Are there any further apologies, Mr CEO? Yeah, and we will have Councillor Herridge, who I believe is suffering a little bit from COVID, unfortunately. We then move, are there any requests for a leave of absence, councillors, at this time? There is nil. We then move on to public question and statement time. We do have 3 questions that were provided in writing prior to the meeting from a Mrs. D. Newton of Wanneroo, Mrs. Z. Fulcher, from Tapping, and Mr. B. Nicol from Two Rocks. We do have on the register a question from Bruce Nicol. Bruce, if you'd like to attend the lectern and provide your name and address for our records. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, all. And I'll get to the right page here.
Yeah, just your name, full name and address for our records. Thank you, Bruce.
Right, Bruce Nicol, 15 Thaden Grove, Two Rocks.
Thank you very much.
Question 1. As the council will no doubt be aware, on the 4th of May 2022, the JDAP approved the Woolworths DA at the foot of King Neptune in Two Rocks. One of the matters that were discussed during the JDAP meeting was whether or not the review of the ASP 70 had been formally commenced. The answer was unfortunately no. Although there has been much discussion about the review of the entire structure plan, nothing has been formally commenced. The current structure plan proposes more commercial development and high density housing, leaving Two Rocks with no foreshore area at all and the prospect of more Woolworths type developments in the area. Can the council provide an assurance to the Two Rocks community that it will be reviewing the ASP 70 and even the overlying DSP 43 to recognise the tourism aspect and stop further development of this nature in this area.
Mr Nichols, you have the written answer there in front of you, do you?
Yes.
Fantastic. Did you require further clarification on that answer?
Oh, right. I haven't even read it yet, sorry. The administration does not have frame, Yes. No, not at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, on your next question, you also have a written response there as well.
Yeah.
But certainly if you wish to just simply ask the question as you're already at the lectern, that's absolutely fine.
As a concerned resident of Two Rocks, I was shocked that the Woolworths Two Rocks proposal was approved by JDAP against overwhelming opposition from local residents as they ignored the large volume of presentations about the local empathy for the cultural and historical attachment to the former Atlantis Marine Park as a place of heritage significance. Despite the Heritage Council recently announcing an imminent assessment of the former Atlantic precinct, there seems to be some confusion or misinterpretation of the expectations of the content of the Two Rocks strategic plan and its appropriateness for the future development of the former Atlantis Marine Park as a tourist destination. Reading the ASP 70, it seems that it was totally divined by Finney to his own advantage, and I now ask the Council urgently to readdress the ASP 70, including consultation with the community to rededicate the Atlantis Two Rocks precinct as a tourist destination of note and a public asset. The administration does not currently have a time frame for a new ASP 70 withstanding. Any new review will be subject to public consultation processes required under the Planning and Development Local Planning Scheme Regulation 2015 in relation to amendments to the structure plans, which is the answer, of course. Thank you.
Yeah, so just on that again, if you required any clarification of that response?
My only question would be is that seems fairly, will I say negative, that we should be getting a quicker response and a more positive response from the council, I would have hoped. I also might like to add that I have developed an alternative plan to Mr Finney's development of the area, and if anybody was slightly interested, they are welcome to contact me and talk to me about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just on that, Mr Dixon, did you have any comments to make on that final point Mr Nichols just raised?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, administration would be happy to meet with Mr Nichols and he can explain his plans or proposals for Two Rocks. We'd be happy to listen to Mr Nichols' views.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's all of the questions we have listed. Are there any further questions from the gallery this evening? There being none, I'll close public question time. Councillors, we then move on to item four, which is confirmation of minutes. Councillors, we are looking for a mover and seconder to confirm the minutes of the ordinary council meeting of 1/05/22, held on the 12th of April 2022. Moved Councillor Rose, seconded Councillor Sangali. Councillors, you have in front of you your vote. If you could just cast your vote, please. Okay, I declare that carried unanimously. Councillors, we then have the minutes of the special council meeting held on the 2nd of May 2022. Mover, Councillor Baker. Seconded, Councillor Berry. Councillors, we will then, and the confirmation of minutes vote, if you could please vote on that now. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Move on to item 5, announcements by the Mayor without discussion. There is nil. Item 6 is questions from elected members. Are there any questions? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you. Just a clarification either from yourself, Deputy Mayor, or the CEO. We've now had 2 commitments for our Alkimos swimming facility. And I just wanted to clarify, because I received a brochure today from one of the candidates, it was actually the Labor one, and it states that they're gifting $30 million, which an email that came out from administration a couple of weeks ago only stated $25 million. Have you got an update to that? Is it 25 or is it 30?
I can respond to that. And just before we do move anything further on this, councillors, that's just for the record. I think that's fair. But any other comments about the election itself or any of the candidates, I'll likely rule out of order. But this would be relevant to council business. The announcement that was attended by...
Can I just declare a conflict of interest and leave the room while this is discussed, please?
Yep, certainly. Councillor Aitken.
Thank you.
Yours is 45. 45 and change.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Miles. Just for advice and record, the first announcement was actually made at Aquamotion. That was from the ALP. Their total amount was 30. That included the 5 that was already provided by the federal government. So that was a total of 30, which is net 25, if you like. And the announcement on Saturday morning by the Prime Minister was for a total of 35, which also included the 5 that was already provided. So that's a net 30. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the only clarity, only because I got a brochure and I thought after your email from the other week, I thought that doesn't look right, that's all.
No, that's fine. Happy to provide that clarification. We just need to get Councillor Aitken back. So assuming there's no more questions from councillors. Thank you, councillors. We move on to item 7, which is petitions. I have a petition that Councillor Miles, you will have a petition to present.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. This is a petition from electors of the city. 55 signatures have been placed on the signature panel, and only one of those was unverified, so it's a very good petition. And the petition is that the City of Wanneroo note that while we, the petitioners, do not object in general to the establishment of storage facilities for caravans or boats outside the urban areas, we wish to note our strong objection and do not approve of the proposed scheme amendment 198, allowing the additional use of car park at lot 108 Neves Road, Marijina. And there are 4 reasons, namely that this particular lot is too confined. It's not a very wide lot, and they feel that it would actually be encroaching their amenity of the neighbours. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. A mover and seconder to accept the petitions. Move Councillor Savitten, seconded Councillor Aitken. Councillors, if you could cast your votes, please. It's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Just an update on the petition, which is UPO 10522, removal of trees from the Capricorn Estate in Yanchep. There is a note from administration that a report will be presented to the 14th of June 2022 Ordinary Council meeting. Councillors, we move on to reports and just declarations of interest. Councillors, I note that we have a declaration of interest on PSO2 from Councillor Parker, and I believe we have a declaration of interest from Councillor Wright on MN01. Are there any further declarations, councillors? Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Agenda item CS02-05, I beg your pardon, CS03-05-22, warrant payments for the period 31 March. I declare an interest in expense item 2999. That expense item related to the City providing financial assistance to the Two Rocks Wanneroo sub-branch of the Two Rocks Yanchep sub-branch of the RSL to host a stall at the recent performance by the Dubbo Symphony Orchestra in Splendid Park. I am a member of the sub-branch of the RSL. I have been a member of the RSL for 37 years, and on the day I actually assisted in the setup of the marquee for the sub-branch and manned it myself personally. And as such, I declare an impartiality interest in those circumstances. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. We can just note that when we come to those items as well. You've already made the full declaration. Councillors, we move on to item PSO10522. Is there a mover for this item, councillors? Move Councillor Wright, seconded Councillor Miles. Councillors, are there any objections to this item? Councillors, we can then go for a vote on that item. There being no objections. Councillors, if you could cast your votes, please. Yep, I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move on to item PSO20522, which is the consideration of the draft coastal management plan. Councillor Parker, you have an interest on this matter.
Oh dear. Okay. Yes, I do. With regard to item PSO2-05-22, I disclose that I have a proximity interest. As a consequence, there may be a perception that my impartiality on the matter may be affected. I declare that I will consider this matter on its merits and vote accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillors, we need a mover and seconder for this item. Moved Councillor Miles, seconded Councillor Sangalli. Councillor Miles, did you wish to speak to this item?
Just briefly, thank you, Deputy Mayor. The report is very good. I know administration and council have been working on this for some time. It was good and pleased to see some of the expansion of some of the animal areas that are required, and also that administration are now looking for a future part of our coastline to be used for large animals. And I'm looking forward to seeing that come to fruition. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Sangalli.
I don't have much further to say other than to thank administration for their consultation with the community and making sure that this was a community-led plan. And I'm happy to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sangali. Are there any speakers for the item, councillors? Councillor Aitken?
Thank you. I'm really happy to support this item. I'm particularly happy about the investigation of a large animal beach because I brought that up previously, and with the number of large animals, that is horses, we have in the city of Wanneroo, it would be great if we could have a large animal beach within the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aitken. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Savitten?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm speaking in favour of the report, in favour of this particular item. The report is a very good report. I only have one real query, and a lot of ratepayers have rang me and said that they're not happy with the number of beaches that are there, number of dog beaches that are there. I believe there are far too many, but on the overall, the report itself has been really well dealt with, and I hope we look at that in the future with regards to the dog beaches, because I think they could cause us some problem at some time in the future. But other than that, the report is excellent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Savitten. Are there speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Baker?
Thank you, Mr Chair, through the Chair. Just to echo what's been said already, the report's a very detailed, comprehensive report. Every reasonably foreseeable issue that can arise in the future has been properly addressed. There's always this lingering issue, of course, of ocean level or sea level change, as it's commonly known, which will require further management through time. The rate of ocean level rising may slow, it may increase, who knows. And of course, that particular factor is very relevant when one considers the topography or the profile, so to speak, of our coastline, where it can range from obviously wide sandy beaches to rocky outcrops with very little beach as such at all. And there are other issues which relate to basically winter storms, which many people have worried about as being a source of the erosion of the general system, but forgetting the fact that the winter storms have been in place for, they've been occurring for hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of years. There's no need to panic. Beyond that, yes, in terms of the issue of dog beaches or dog stretches for dogs only and owners, once again, as the population of the coastal strip increases, no doubt the need for additional dog beaches will arise, or the need for existing ones to be further extended. And the bottom line is, I don't think we have really much to fear about that. We have a very big coastline. The bottom line is that if dog owners act responsibly in accordance with their obligations under the Dog Act and related regulations and our local laws, common sense should prevail, reasonable behaviour should prevail, and I'm sure that we'll be able to address any issues that arise regarding demands for additional dog beaches in the future. I commend the report to elected members. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Are there any speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Rowe?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. And just briefly to add, I think one of the things that I like to see the most was the reference to accessibility. And I know that seems to be common practice, but it just shows that the city is trying to ensure that its coastline is accessible and can be enjoyed by all. I also appreciate administration's effort to go and do some extra due diligence after last week in terms of the City of Mandurah and the City of Cockburn after some questions that were asked. And in terms of the dog beaches, I think it's well known that even with appropriate signage, coastal ranger patrols, etc., it's still going to fall back on the individual responsibility of the dog owner to make sure that their dog is behaving appropriately and it doesn't diminish the experience of the coastline for all. But I think overall it's a really good report.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Are there any speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Berry?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just want to thank admin also for giving us such a comprehensive report to read. I'm in favour of the report overall. I do have some concerns from the people at Catalina regarding making Mindarie a dog beach. That has caused quite a lot of community concern, and I just want to make sure that that's flagged going forward as we plan further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Very fantastic report from administration and a great blueprint for the future of our coastal area. Particularly excited to see that admin has changed their point on the horse beach, and I look forward to seeing that come to a future council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Speakers against? Speakers for? There being none. Councillor Miles, did you want to exercise the right of reply? Councillor Miles has decided not to exercise that right of reply. Councillors, I ask you to vote or place your votes.
Deputy Mayor,
Yes?
this says main substantion for PSO2. We're on. Oh, sorry.
We are on PSO2. Thank you, Councillor Hartley. I declare that carried unanimously. Councillors, we move on to PSO3, Approval Services, which is the consideration of the proposed central precinct local structure plan for Scotland Drive in Eglinton. Yep, mover and seconder for this item, councillors. Move Councillor Miles, seconded Councillor Savitten. Councillor Miles, did you wish to speak?
Yeah, look, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Again, I support the recommendation by administration. As was discussed at the briefing session last week, I think the district structure plan for this area, or the structure plan for this area, was somewhat in a different formation. This particular area was supposed to be commercial. The landowners applied and had that change from commercial to urban. I didn't have a problem with that, and therefore, for me, you need to be able to have that proper access from this new side of from the eastern side of the railway at that point, because this is on the eastern side of the railway line in that area. So for administration to recommend that the footbridge be installed so people can obviously access the rest of the community and the rest of the services either by bike, by skateboard or just by walking, I think it's something that needs to be put in place. I did hear and understand the concern of the developer suggesting that the cost of that particular footbridge, but unfortunately I think access over the longer period is going to be far more important than some short-term cost that may be put on them by putting the bridge in place. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Savitten.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, I'm speaking in support of this. All the points covered by Councillor Miles are prudent. The only point that I have to make really, and I asked the question last week about how many flyovers or pedestrian walkways across that particular freeway, whatever, were paid by the state government. In this case here, and two weren't. And in this case here, I guess administration is asking that the developer pay for that. I believe it's very excessive in my view. I would like to see that also being attributed by the state government. But overall, I think the structure plan is good. As a commercial site, it may have had a slightly differing attraction, but as a residential site, I think it will certainly deliver to the community in that particular area. So I certainly support the item, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Savitten. Councillor speakers for this item. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I strongly agree with and support Council's recommendation. Creating connectivity is strongly supported and encouraged in the City of Wanneroo, and the proposal by the developers to remove what I certainly see as being a vital connection, being the bridge, should not be supported, and assurance given that it will go ahead. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Rowe.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Just a brief comment. Last week, the developer was saying about the potential increase in cost for the lots, and I completely understand their position, but there also would be a reputational risk and a cost to the reputation if accessibility isn't there for that community as well. And I think weighing up both of those considerations, administration's position is right on the money.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Speakers against? Speakers for? There being no further speakers, Councillor Miles, would you like to exercise your right of reply? Councillors, we're going to, we'll put the vote on this. If you could cast your votes, please. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move on to item PSO4, which is consideration of following advertising for amendment number 194. Councillors, we're looking for a mover and seconder on this item, councillors. Move Councillor Baker, seconded Councillor Sangalli. Councillor Baker.
Thanks, Mr Chair. I'll be very brief. In a nutshell, the recommendation is supported by me for obvious reasons. It has considerable merit. There are two different categories of reasons. The first is reasons relating to planning matters, planning interest considerations, and the second relates perhaps to commercial and needs, so to speak, of the local community. The proposed amendment will not be detrimental to the amenity of the locale in which this block of land is situated. It will not result in additional or excessive noise. It will be a passive additional use of the land. Any visual amenity issues arising can be addressed by built form or natural form screening, using vegetation, of course. And the use of the property, the additional use, I should say, will not have any serious vehicle traffic impacts upon the land or local roads. Now, in terms of the non-planning issues, of course, there's clearly a need for this additional use, particularly in Perth's far northern suburbs. I know the report refers to the need in the Perth metropolitan area generally, but obviously I would have thought that our focus primarily is within the city of Wanneroo. And perhaps the need is even greater in the new coastal strip subdivisions up the coast, of course, from Mindarie all the way up to Two Rocks, particularly those new ones where a lot of the blocks, of course, that are being sold are very small indeed. Every house that is built will have a two-car garage, but I don't know if anyone's ever walked around, for example, Jindawi or parts of Alkimos on the, if you like, the western side of Marmion Avenue, but you just wonder how the hell it's possible to fit two Hyundai Getzers in side by side with one of these garages, and golf clubs and a surf skiing and a wheelbarrow. Obviously, these smaller blocks are very attractive, particularly for people who lead lock and leave lifestyles, such as five-home miners, of course. They're very attractive for first-home owners as well, of course, comparatively speaking. They're cheaper to buy by way of a house and land package or an existing home of, say, 450 to 500 square metres. There's clearly a need for additional storage facilities for owners of these sorts of blocks or house and land blocks. And of course, that need does not arise within the coastal strip suburbs at all. And the other aspect of the matter, of course, which is very important, is, of course, in terms of the east-west access to this proposed additional use site, it's very good, so to speak, for the coastal strip residents, particularly those living in the far northern coastal strip of the area. In short, it's a common sense approach, a common sense way of dealing with real live issues. It's also a further way of course, assisting the owner to derive an additional income from the property. It stands to reason that any DA, when assessed, would have to determine the maximum number of bays, storage bays within the site, and also take into account the need for internal storage lanes or easements, informal easements, to enable vehicles and vehicles that can be parked in this car park to enter and leave the car park. It will not have an impact upon the water table for reasons that are mentioned in the report. Many of these caravans, as I understand it, do not need to be attached to scheme water at any stage. Some may require 240-volt power, depending on where they're positioned within the block of land, because of the number of tua trees, of course, which are protected. They're casting shade on solar panels, which may not generate enough ampage to recharge batteries. That's a matter for the owner to consider, of course, in due course. And obviously the scheme power to this block of land. So this is a good news story. We need more blocks or the use of more blocks to be expanded like this. Where it's positioned within this particular zone is common sense. It'll help the owners derive an income. It'll provide a very, very important need and service to local residents, particularly those living in the coastal strip on small blocks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Sangalli.
I don't think there's anything further to add. Thank you.
I was just wondering, actually, I did ask the CEO whether or not, hell, we should have timed this. I think we were getting awfully close. Speakers for this item, councillors. Councillor Savitan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. With some caution. Look, I hear what Councillor Baker has said, and certainly a demand for this sort of use. It is an additional use. What I'm critical about, but I'll speak in the affirmative though, what I'm critical about is that as a result of one particular property which Council supported, it now is opened up a minefield. And what I don't like about these particular things is that they're all, what is the word I'm looking for? They're operating their businesses without approval. And they are coming to Council after they've been picked up by our compliance team. And our compliance team seems to be under a lot of pressure. Always. We now have 8 or 9 people in that department, where we had 1 when I first came to Council. I am in favour of this particular use because it is now an approved use, but retrospective was the word I was after, Chair. These retrospective uses, if they are picked up under these situations from now on, I believe we should have severe and more penalties on them, even though they can be approved. But what they are doing is sneaking under the radar and carrying on businesses which are ex-uses without approval, and then coming to Council for retrospective approval, which will then be granted. Whether that is a way of saving fees or not, I don't know. But I am in support of it. I believe there is a place to park caravans and trailers, etc. Whether it's in a rural area, it would have been better within a light industrial or industrial areas, but that is no longer the case. I do endorse this, and I hope that we're more cautious when we make these decisions in the future, and we resurrect our new town planning scheme 3 and make it much more severe, where people actually have to adhere by the law and come to Council first before they make these uses relevant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Savitan. Very robust discussion arguing for the case. Councillors, any against? Councillors speaking for? Councillor Nguyen?
Look, I wasn't intended to speak, but given what was said earlier, I thought I'd respond to some of those comments. I do support this item and the recommendation and the additional use as a car park. It's important that we encourage applicants to come forward if, for whatever reason, they have used a business that's not permitted under the planning law. And if we do impose a harsher sentence, that would not encourage people to come forward. And that's the concern I have if that was to, I think, be considered in the future. We want everyone to do the right thing, and we have an applicant that is doing the right thing, that's come forward, made an application, and then allow Council to then consider and approve. And that's the risk that they take. If we don't approve it, then obviously the risk is they would lose their business and the entire income. Now, time has changed. We know that farmland, especially in City of Wanneroo, slowly over time will be losing their part of their water licence, and so we need to consider alternative uses. And this is one option. There aren't many options where you've got large farmlands and you can't grow crops. So I think this is one viable business. I don't know if there are any other viable business that someone who owns farmland somewhere quite far, not many amenities close by, to be able to use the land in a business viable manner. So I certainly will encourage different alternative use as long as they are consistent with the relevant planning law, and I do support this item.
Thank you, Councillor Nguyen, and thank God we're not part of the judiciary and we don't get to hand down harsh sentences. I just thought I'd point that one out. Speakers against this item, councillors? Speakers for? Councillor Baker, right to reply? Yes.
Yes, please. Thank you, sir. Just in terms of the suggestion that this recommendation, once endorsed and the amendment once adopted, will result in a minefield. I don't believe that is the case. It's very easy to police uses of this kind within the rural zone areas by using near maps, even RP data. If you've got a mate who's a real estate agent, near maps, satellite, it's very easy to do, dead set easy. You don't have to drive around the streets. Another way around it, as some councils have done in the past, not just with this particular proposed additional use, but with additional uses that appear to be out of sync, or well and truly out of sync with the permitted use, is to have an amnesty, so to speak, an amnesty whereby you give landowners who are not fully complying with the permitted uses within the relevant zone, particularly in rural zones, to come forward and say, well, you know, here's the situation. A Gran parks a van out the back. I charge her $10 a week. I've got some friends down the road from Mandurah who are based in Mandurah. They park a van. I've got 5 or 10 vans. I earn $100 a week, and that just covers the power, and I'm providing the service. There are also ways of managing it, once again, to ensure that people who own these vans don't live in them on site, of course. We don't want de facto caravan sites to appear all over the place, like a series of gypsy communities in the Wanneroo rural zone, of course. I'm not having a go at gypsies, of course. I'm a bit of a gypsy myself, to be frank, but in certain aspects of life, at least, anyway. But the other thing too is that overall, in terms of retrospective use, any DA that's approved is prospective in its operation. Of course, it's not retrospective. And the city, if the city grants the DA prospectively, of course, which they all are, then impliedly, of course, the city has waived its right to prosecute the landowner for not complying with the town planning scheme. And in many instances, it just stands to reason. You have to take a practical, common sense approach. You don't become some sort of a Stasi policeman policing every minor alleged breach. Common sense has to apply, and it will, I'm sure. And I'm sure that many of these lots, as and when further applications under the amendment come forward for approval, many of these owners, I'm sure, would only need perhaps 15, 20, 30 square metres of the land within their property, depending on the size of the property, for the vans and other items, I don't know, jet skis, boats, to be parked up. And it's a passive use of the land. Appropriately screened, you wouldn't even know it was there. And there are so many different fast-growing trees that are used nowadays for screening purposes. Of course, the most obvious one is the olive tree, of course, the non-fruiting olive tree. It's actually marketed as such, and they grow like a weed after 2 years. They grow like a weed. They're like chicken manure, as Linda Aitken knows.
Councillor Baker, just one minor point with the right of reply. It's not introducing additional information. I just thought I'd point that out. Thank you.
I'll withdraw my horticultural advice. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have given that advice. It was inappropriate. I could be wrong too. I watch Gardening Australia every Sunday. I love it. Sorry, I'll shut up. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillors, if I could ask you to please cast your votes. I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move on to item PSO 50522, which is the consideration following advertising of Amendment 198. Councillor Miles. Moving? Fantastic. Councillor Aitken seconding. Thank you. Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. This is the one where we had the petition that I tabled earlier from the residents. This is the neighbour of this particular one, which is Amendment 198. As I was going to say, the amendments themselves are only to amend the ground or the land to be able to have car park and other parking uses. Both of these, the previous one, PSO 40522, that one and this one will still need to go through a development application process. So they'll still need to go through the appropriate other processes to actually get approval to operate on their land. This is just one step in that process. The reason I'm supporting this particular application at 198 is because it very much mimics what this council approved last year and is up before the Commission, which is Amendment 199, which is to allow car parking, boat parking, jet skis, whatever, on land that is otherwise, as indicated in the previous item, on land that can't be, nothing happens, sterile, it's got no water use, and it's just black sand blowing around. And my main concern was obviously up in the Nirabup and Carabooda areas and the Narragacup areas. And whilst there's going to be some short-term uses down closer towards Wanneroo, like this one, as we discussed last week. This one's only going to have a 3-year time frame on it once the district plan and all that comes into effect, as Mr Bowring indicated in the replies to my questions. So I am in support of it being the amendment. And the reason for that also, secondly, is even if we did not approve this particular use or approve for this to be a use on this particular lot, when our own city's Amendment 199 comes into effect, this person would just be able to lodge a DA under that and go through the process under that. So we're not actually, making any major changes there. I do understand the neighbouring residences next door, understand totally. The lots where this one is, there is clearly some additional issues that we'll have to work through, especially when the DA is lodged, but I'm sure administration will view all that in time when that all happens. So, Deputy Mayor, happy to support the Amendment 198 for this particular use because it is in line with the city's own amendment, which is Amendment 199. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Aitken.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm quite happy to support this. I heard what Councillor Baker said previously, and maybe we can look at once Amendment 199 has come through an amnesty so that all of the areas that are rendered sterile through lack of water have the opportunity to do that, tidy it up. Because if we have a record of everywhere that are storing caravans and jet skis and all of that, there's a consistency of regulations and how these businesses are conducted, whereas how it's going at the moment, everyone's doing it spasmodically, and so it can come under guidelines and be regulated appropriately for the safety of everybody and for all of the businesses. So just keep that in mind and ask that my fellow councillors support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aitken. Speakers for the item?
Question, sir?
Councillor Baker.
A question, please, Mr Chair.
Councillor Baker.
Thank
yes.
you. My question is directed to Mr Dixon, if I can, please, Mark. On page 329 of the agenda, there's a table that appears 1/3 of the way down the page. It attaches a time limitation to the proposed condition, and it states condition to expire within 3 years of the date of the subject land being gazetted urban under the Metro Region scheme. Just wondering, Mark, being realistic, how far away is that gazetting? Is we're talking 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? I know you'd have to make an educated guesstimate, so to speak, but I'm just curious. 3 years, what are we looking at, do you think, sir?
Mr Dixon.
If you can't answer the question, I appreciate that.
Thank you, and through you, Deputy Mayor, I can't give a definitive timeline for that. I would, however, imagine that given the progression that's been undertaken with this area, that it could be within the next 2 to 3 years, but I wouldn't want to give a definitive timeframe to council.
Thanks. Just one further question. I won't labour on this point. I'll be very brief. I'll try and keep true form. In a nutshell, in the report as well, Mr Dixon, page 328, the third last paragraph from the bottom makes reference to trucks being permitted to be parked there, but they must be trucks that are not used for a commercial purpose. Now, I don't know of any truck that is not used for a commercial purpose. Well, I won't tell the story, but yes, I just can't envisage a truck that would not be used for a commercial purpose. No one would go to Woolies and do their shopping with with a Mack truck, a semi-trailer rig, a 4-tonne truck, tip truck, cement truck. They're not really families to the vehicles. You don't see many parked in driveways and houses around the suburbs in the city of Wanneroo. Could you think of an example, please, Mark, of a truck that is not used for a commercial purpose, please?
I think, Mr Dixon, we finally got to the question. Are you able to respond, please?
Look, I think that there may be some instances where a truck is not used for a commercial purpose. It may be a personal use. And I couldn't give you a definitive answer to that, but there may be instances, and I think it leaves it appropriate to include that it shouldn't be used for business or commercial purposes, but there may be instances where it isn't being actually used for that.
Councillor Baker.
That's just a supplementary, Mr Dixon. Would one such purpose be deemed not to be a commercial purpose if the truck is being used by a charity which is recognised or registered under the Charitable Collections Act and which charity appears in the National Register of Charities. Would that therefore take it out of the use of being commercial use? It would be charitable use, which is normally not commercial as such. Although there have been a couple of terrible instances where perhaps some charities have been very commercial historically. But would you agree that that perhaps could apply here, sir, please?
I couldn't give a definitive answer to that, Chair. I'll have to take that question on notice.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Speakers, I think we're still at speakers 4. Councillor Svetton.
A question, Deputy Mayor. On page 341, just a question of a query. I'm looking at the map adjoining that, and it shows the relevant site, but it says under condition 2, the additional use shall only apply to a portion of lot 108 as delineated on the scheme, and I'm not too sure if I know what that portion is. And if Mr Dixon maybe could clarify that for me, please.
Mr Dixon.
Through you, Chair, I think it relates to the subject site. I'm not sure if it relates to a specific proportion. It's clearly delineated in the amendment that it, as shown on pages 342 and 343.
In that case, it appears to be the whole site, Chair. Look, on the overall, I guess, once again, a retrospective use coming to council is what I sort of spoke about previously, but I do have some concerns with the DA. I hope that there will be some dust suppression conditions with regards to adjoining neighbours, because obviously there have been some neighbours who haven't been happy with what's been happening on this particular property, and I would like to see dust suppression because scheme water is not available here, I believe, and rainwater is the main catchment. So as pristine a water from the main roof is what I'm saying is that people require. Other than that, I guess it's a fait accompli under the what we are going through with these particular caravans and jet skis, etc. I don't have any other objection. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm accepting that as a speaker 4. Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Baker.
Yes, to speak for, yes. Once again, I support this recommendation for basically the same reasons that I referred to earlier on in the earlier agenda item. Page 330 of the agenda, paragraph number 1, dealing with the site itself, is very telling. It says that the subject site is primarily zoned urban deferred, and what we're looking at is a deferred urban zone, of course, that will no doubt in due course within a couple of years, I think Mr Dixon said, which may well be gazetted urban under the Metropolitan Region Scheme within the next 3 to 4 years or so. So this is no doubt a short-term, well, comparatively speaking, a short-term use. And if you're worried about uses that affect traffic and noise and what have you, of course, I can't think of a zone that's more busy, so to speak, or than an urban zone or residential zone, so to speak. But it's deferred anyway. So this is really a short-term stopgap usage, whereas the previous agenda item, if I recall, did not have a time limitation attached to it, a grandfather clause, so to speak. So once again, for the sake of consistency, I think if you back the previous agenda item and resolution using the same logic, you would support this. So I urge elected members to support this recommendation, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Speakers against? Councillor Huntley. Oh, right. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Huntley.
Thank you. I would just like to say that one of the things that it's probably more of a statement than anything else, again, like the dust suppression, we do need to make sure that if people are going to put these caravan parks in, that there is sufficient trees and sufficient camouflage on these areas so that it doesn't annoy the neighbours next door. It is a bit of a nightmare to be looking over an absolute total caravan park, especially if you've got a 2-storey house. So I do think, again, with the DA, we need to look at the privacy of these surrounds and make sure that these caravans aren't parked in fire breaks either. Thank you.
Just for clarification, we weren't talking about caravan parks, it's just parking caravans. Yeah, I just, for those listening in at home, I just wanted to make sure that we have that. Are there speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Miles, right a reply?
I will just add a couple of items, but to what was suggested by councillors. I understand administration does have a fairly effective policy on what is deemed to be commercial, what is not deemed to be commercial. The registration of the vehicle pretty much gives you 100% of the idea of what that is. You may also have what would deem to be looking like a bus, but if it doesn't have seats and it's going to be turned into a camper, then obviously it would be privately registered as opposed to commercially registered. And as we know, the state does charge considerable more for commercial registration of vehicles, so you're not going to commercially register a vehicle when you don't have to, especially if it's for private use. I also understand when we did discuss the Amendment 199, Deputy Mayor, last year, we did talk about whether or not people could actually store vintage trucks, maybe army trucks and the like, and I think all of that was suggested to be okay by administration. But I'm sure that once Amendment 198, 199 and 194 comes back, and I think there's another one in the wing there somewhere, I'm sure administration will have a bit of a policy for council to view, so these can be dealt with in a lot more proactive way. I do like the idea of possibly having some sort of mercy rule or something like an amnesty. I think that's a good idea. Because I think then we can, because we already know there's a lot more out there, so we would like to get that in place. And with modern caravans being what they are, some with solar panels, some needing to be hooked up to power, we do obviously need to take into consideration the possibility that battery fires and the like can happen. So that will be taken care of, and I'm sure Mr Dixon's directorate will look at that very clearly and carefully once those DAs come in. Otherwise, councillors, I ask you to support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. With that, the debate is closed. Councillors, if I could ask you to please place your votes on this item, or cast your votes. I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to ASO 1, which is the provision of streetscape maintenance for arterial roads. Councillors looking for a mover and seconder on this item. Councillor Miles, Councillor Savitton seconding. Councillor Miles. Now, just bearing in mind, councillors, if we do get into any of the discussions around the detail, we might need to go into confidential session.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. No, I won't be talking about the actual tender itself. I'm happy with the Directorate requiring this extra provision to look after our ever-growing areas of streets. And I know also administration are looking at ways to try and obviously minimise the maintenance and try and make sure that the weed suppression and control on some of these streets can be managed in other ways. So I'm looking forward to that later on. But on this occasion, happy to accept the tender. I did ask some questions last week. Administration did contact me about other WALGA RFQs, and there are many that happen behind the scenes, but obviously they're just dealt with at a lower level. And I do thank the Director of
Corporate,
Ms Jennings, for her information on Wednesday of last week. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Savitton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm pleased that they've the actual contract has been split two ways. It makes it fairer. I mean, it's a big one to handle. So by splitting it in portions 1 and 3, and the second point into portion 2, I'm happy with the overall terms of the report and the recommendation. So I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Savitton. Councillors, any speakers against? Speakers for? Just a brief comment from me, councillors, and I think before we go to Councillor Miles with his right of reply, I think our community recognises and appreciates the level of maintenance that's provided to as a result of these contracts, and we've seen a reasonably good standard, and I think thanks go to the Director of Assets and his team for making sure that that's reflected, and our community certainly have given us that feedback as well. Councillor Miles, did you have any closing comments on that? No, Councillor Miles doesn't. Close the debate. If I could then please ask you to cast your votes. Declare that carried unanimously. Councillors, we then move on to CPO 1, which is the review of the outcome of Aquamotion and Kingsway tender process. Moving mover and seconder on this item, move Councillor Wright, seconder Councillor Nguyen. Councillor Wright? No. No probs. Councillor Nguyen?
Look, it is unfortunate we can't find a tender that represents acceptable value for money for the city to run the services for Wanneroo Aquamotion and Kingsway Indoor Stadium, certainly to keep the existing arrangement that the city runs, and the city is doing quite well to do that, but hopefully we can find someone better value to also save the city if possible, but I think it's good that the city is also managing it at the moment, so certainly we'll support declining all the tenders that we've received.
Thank you, Councillor Nguyen. Councillors, speakers for? Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to actually say a big well done to the Aquamotion staff. They've done an absolute brilliant job, especially through COVID, and they have looked after the facilities and they've made sure that our community is very happy there. So I say to them, well done and keep going.
Thank you, Councillor Huntley. Councillor Baker.
Thanks, Mr Chair. I'll be very brief. This is a classic instance, in my view, where if the private sector believes that it's simply not cost effective to provide the services provided at these facilities, then it's a case where either the state government or local government should step in. There's no doubt about that. But what gets me is why does it always seems to be the case that from the city's perspective, it's the city of Wanneroo that steps in to provide these sorts of facilities. The state government owns and manages many sporting complexes, pool complexes throughout the Perth metro area. And of course, a cynic would say, well, look, it's all about cost shifting. Cost shifting, it's a cost shifting game. With or without grants as well, I might add, grants in terms of assisting with the construction of the facilities. But yes, it stands to reason if the state isn't going to pick up the cudgel and run with it, and if the private sector says, no, we're not going to go broke overnight, we're not stupid, we're not going to buy into a loss maker, the city has to step in, but ratepayers need to realise that this invariably means that they are themselves directly and indirectly subsidising the services being provided in these facilities, and so be it. I know obviously there's a fee-for-service arrangement with users, of course. I have advocated increasing that marginally to at least ensure the maintenance costs, annual maintenance costs, are break even, so to speak, but I don't think there's much support for that. So yeah, classic instances of where the private sector won't do it because there's no dough in it. Government is required to, or should step in and provide the service. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. The speakers against? Speakers for? There are none. Councillor Wright, would you close debate, please?
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Daniel and his team up there in Aquamotion and also the Kingsway Sporting Centre for what they do for the community, and I know they're very flexible in terms of what they offer constituents at the moment, and I know I get a lot of good feedback, particularly from my ward, from residents as well, and we always welcome that, and I know that you're doing a good job up in Aquamotion in Kingsway as well, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. And with that, Councillor Wright's closed debate. So, councillors, if I could ask you to cast your votes. Declare that carried unanimously. Councillors, we then move on to CP 020522, the Animals Amendment Local Laws 2022. Mover on this item, councillors. Councillor Parker, seconded. Councillor Rowe. Councillor Parker.
Nothing to add, thank you. I'm very happy with the report as is.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Rowe? Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Speakers for? Speakers against? Probably don't need the right of reply, Councillor Parker. Councillors, that closed debate. If I could ask you to please cast your votes. Declare that carried unanimously. Councillors, we then move on to CSO 10522, which is the financial activity statement for the period ending 31 March 2022. Mover for this item, councillors. Councillor Rowe moving. Councillor Zavitten seconding. Are there any objections to this item, councillors? There being none, councillors, I'll ask you to please then cast your votes on this item. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We then move on to item CS 020522 from Transactional Finance, proposal for levying differential rates 2022-23. Looking for a mover and seconder on this, councillors. Move Councillor Rowe. Seconding. I'm happy to second, councillors. Thank you. Councillor Rowe, did you wish to? No, I'm happy to take this through to other speakers. Speakers for? Councillor Sangali.
Just a question.
Sure.
On page 454, right up at the top of the page, we talk about how we're going to advertise, and I note that Facebook has not been included in the advertising, which we have previously done.
Mrs. Jennings, you able to provide a response on that?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Chair. We did go through a variety of different ways that we wanted to advertise and came up with this one. So this matches the Local Government Act as to what we have to do. But, you know, if there's other things, we can also add. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sangali, happy with that response?
It's just that we have previously advertised on Facebook, and I think there is an expectation now that it will be advertised.
I would be surprised if it wasn't the case, and certainly in the discussions I've had with the manager of marketing and comms, that's very much the intention, from what I understand.
Okay.
Speaking for?
Question, sir, please.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mr Chair. My question's addressed to Nolene Jennings. My concern is this, that the wording and the way the recommendation has been set out would be very difficult for many members of the public, particularly ratepayers, to interpret. What they basically ask, the question is this: if this recommendation is adopted, will my rates increase in the forthcoming financial year, and if so, to what extent, expressed in percentage terms? Now, I'm not sure if it's possible to answer that question at this early stage, but at least I think we've had some idea, based on the minimum rates, RID rates, of course, proposed to the various categories of differentially rated properties. So just a question to Ms Jennings. In the event that these two recommendations are adopted, will this result in a rates increase for ratepayers and what is the nature and the extent of that rates increase, please? If you're able to make that assessment at this stage, please. Thank you.
It's very difficult to do that, but I'll ask Ms Jennings because Councillor Baker, you'll be aware we actually do have workshops to still go through. But Mrs Jennings?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The resolution is as per the Local Government Act requirements, so that doesn't mean the advert will be identical to the resolution. So the way that the advert will be put together, which we've already talked to the communications section about, is to be able to explain what this equates to. However, this isn't the final decision. So at the top of the advert will say this equates to approximately 4% increase, and then explain all the differential rating, because this ad is actually about the differential rating lines. That's what it's about, I think.
Thank you, Mrs Jennings. Councillor Baker?
Supplementary to Mrs Jennings, I'll refer to page 453 of the agenda, the second last paragraph under the heading consultation. This is the paragraph which purports to summarise the consultation that the city has had with the community when setting its draft budget, without going into detail about what the draft states. But it reads as follows: the proposed differential ratings, in brackets, rate in the dollar, have been calculated based on the directions received from council members during the series of budget workshops held with council members in preparing the 2022-23 annual budget. My question is to Ms Jennings. Those directions, are they confidential, or is the public entitled to know what those directions were from elected members to staff during the budget workshops to date, please?
I'm very happy to answer that on behalf of all of administration, and Councillor Baker, you will know this, that all of those discussions are confidential. Every discussion we have about the budget until budget night is confidential. All elected members are aware of this.
That's unless the information is in the public domain or the city has waived in whole or in part confidentiality. I think you'd agree that that is...
I think your question, Councillor, was about the budget deliberations and the direction provided by elected members. And of course, all of those are confidential.
But in a nutshell, if a ratepayer contacts me tomorrow and says, well, hang on, what directions did council members provide to council staff regarding during the course of the budget workshops? So I can't say it's confidential, it's a secret.
Well, it's
I
up
can't
to
tell
you
what those directions are.
Councillor Baker, that's entirely a decision for you. But of course, you will also know a breach of confidentiality will be a breach of the Local Government Act Code of Conduct. So it's entirely up to you, Councillor. The speakers for. Speakers against. Councillor Rowe, is there any need to close debate?
No, I don't think so. Don't think so. No.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Rowe's now closed debate on this item. Councillors, if I could ask you to please cast your votes. When they come up. There you go. Right, okay, so we have, that's 9 for, 4 against. So against, so for is Councillor Rowe, Councillor Savitten, Councillor Miles, Councillor Sangali, Councillor Coetzee, Councillor Parker, Councillor Berry, Councillor Huntley. Against is Councillor Aitken, Councillor Baker, Councillor Wright and Councillor Nguyen. I declare that carried. Councillors, we move on to item CSO 30522, and just noting Councillor Baker has previously provided his declaration of interest on this item.
Mr Chair, do I need to repeat that formal declaration using the formal words and phraseology used in the idiot card, the cheat sheet?
Yeah, the assistance card, Councillor,
assistance card, that's
you can if you
PC.
wish.
Yes, please. With regard to item CS03-05/2022, I disclose that I have an interest in the expense item I referred to earlier, 9222, The reason for this is that I am a member of the Yanchep Two Rocks sub-branch of the RSL. I've been a member of the RSL for over 37 years, and in respect to this particular event to which the donation related, I helped establish the booth and man the booth during the day. It was a very worthy cause, so I declare that interest. However, I'm going to be very impartial, as you'll soon appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Just a mover and seconder for this item, councillors. Move councillor Rowe, second councillor Savitten. Speakers for, speakers against.
Questions? Any questions, please?
Councillor Baker.
And look, and just to once again apologise in advance for the fact that I've not put these questions in writing. I apologise for that. Without going into explanations, it's something that was unavoidable given some matters that I'm dealing with at the moment. But
again, if I could just reiterate, councillors, it is custom and practice and requested on numerous occasions that these are put in writing to administration so they have fair opportunity and in a respectful way to respond accurately as they can, rather than trying to get that information on the night.
Yes, that's correct. Now, I do recall, Mr Chair, your comments at the briefing session that also that sort of stress is recognised by the city as psychological stress and can impact upon the welfare of staff, and also, of course, we're under duty of care to protect our staff's best interests. But
we indeed do, councillor.
Yes, psychological stress. Yes, I refer to page 458 of the agenda. The expense item is 122825. The payee of the payment was the Indianic Group Proprietary Limited. It related to, as I read it, I could have misread this, roof condition inspections, and underneath that it reads Mindarie Marina Boardwalk maintenance. With the Mindarie Marina Boardwalk, which particular boardwalk does this expense relate to? And also, just bear with me, what is the relationship between someone who prepares reports for a roof with maintaining a boardwalk?
Mr Singh.
I know there's that song, Under the Boardwalk actually doubles as a roof.
Thank you, councillor. Mr Singh.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This item relates to, there's a boardwalk on the western side of Mindarie Marina, which city has a responsibility to look after. So we actually got this inspected for about its condition and what remedial works are required.
Thank you, Mr Singh.
Supplementary, so that particular boardwalk, it is owned by the city. Is it owned by the city and therefore maintained by the city?
If I could, I believe that's exactly the case. Mr Singh, would you like to reaffirm that?
Yes, Deputy Mayor, that boardwalk, which is on the western side of the Mindarie Marina, at the back of the residential properties, it is the city's responsibility to look after that.
Yes. Thank you, Mr Singh. Councillor Rowe.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Either as a point of clarification, or can I exercise my right of reply if everyone's finished?
I don't believe there's any other questions.
I apologise, Mr Chair. I was just giving someone else an opportunity to ask one question. I don't think any other councillors wish to ask questions. I have a couple of questions, please, sir. Please, thank you.
Councillor Baker.
Thanks very much. If I can, please, sir. Yes. I'll just be one moment. When it comes to the issue of refund of the street and verge bonds, in short, and there's various expense items referred to in the warrants of payments, who actually does the mathematical calculations? Is it done internally, or is the applicant, does the applicant have the onus of proof in terms of nominating the monetary sum, and that sum is simply checked by the city? What is the procedure there, please?
Mr Singh.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We have a process in place where once a dwelling is complete and the builder requests the verge bond refund, our technical officers will go out to site, or they do a desktop analysis based on the information provided by the builder. After the assessment, we determine whether any asset needs to be repaired or not. If there is no repair required, full refund is provided.
So there is a very thorough process.
And just another question, if I can, I'll be very brief, sir. In short, I refer to page 522 of the agenda. I refer to three specific expense items. The numbers attached to them are 471, 472 and 474. This relates to the purchase of, as I read it, alcohol in the sum of approximately $1,100. Was that purchase of alcohol, did that relate to a specific city-hosted event involving the community, or was it an in-house expense incurred, for example, at the licensed councillor's bar in the Civic Centre, please? It just seems to be a lot of money for 1 month, $1,100 and something dollars in alcohol. Please, thank you.
Mrs Jennings.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. These payments are actually for a variety of functions and events, so that's about as far down as I can get on this short notice.
I absolutely acknowledge that. And had you had more time, Mrs Jennings, I'm sure you could have been more thorough. Councillor Baker, you have any further questions? Thank you. Councillor Rowe, you happy to close debate?
Yeah, I am. Just with one comment, that in terms of the document that we've all received in terms of changes to reports and public questions, can I ask Director Jennings, this item on the record is unchanged from the briefing session, so in terms of there being an assertion that we've had insufficient time to run through and put questions in writing, the same items are on the agenda tonight as were last week, which we received now more than a week and a half ago. I just want to ask if that's correct.
That is an excellent observation, Councillor Rowe, and I just asked Mrs Jennings if she could confirm that.
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor, I have not changed this report since last week.
Thank you, Mrs Jennings. Councillor Rowe, with that, have you closed debate? Thank you. Councillors, debate has now been closed. If I could ask you to please cast your votes. Councillor Aitken? Yep. Thank you very much, Councillor Aitken. Declare that carried unanimously. Councillors, we move on to the Chief Executive Officer's reports from Governance and Legal, CEO 105-22, the review of the Standing Orders Local Law 2008. For a mover and seconder on this, councillors, moved Councillor Miles, seconded Councillor Rowe, and we have councillors, with some indulgence, I'll go to Councillor Wright for some brief discussion on his amendment. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm wishing to withdraw this amendment. However, I would like this to be discussed at either the next council forum or a council forum, in particular with this amendment, and to bring it back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. That's a very wise move. Thank you, and I'm sure it's appreciated. Councillor Miles, are you happy to discuss this item?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, the item is pretty straightforward. It's an item that the council and the administration have been working on for a little while. Whilst I did read the amendment that was proposed for tonight and do somewhat support some of the ideas within that, I can understand that it may hold our whole process up, especially when it's been going on for so long. And I think from administration's advice, we are actually running out of time to actually get this in and gazetted. But happy to support it, and then we'll review some of those changes that Councillor Wright would like us to do in the next month or two. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Rowe. Thank you. Councillors, speakers for? Speakers against? Councillor Miles, you probably don't need the right of reply on that. The debate has closed. Councillors, if I could please ask you to cast your votes. I declare that carried, and the only vote against is Councillor Nguyen. Everybody else voted for the item. Thank you, councillors. We move on to now motions on notice, MNO 105-22, from Councillor Wright, the upgrade of Wanneroo Road, East Road intersection. Yeah, Councillor Wright, do you have a seconder for this item? Councillor Savitten. Councillor Wright, you have an impartiality on this item?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. You'll hear from me a lot in this portion of the meeting. So with regard to item MN01, upgrade of Wanneroo Road, East Road intersection, I disclose that I am a resident on East Road, and as a consequence there may be a perception that my impartiality on this matter may be affected. I declare that I will consider this matter on its merits and vote accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. And with that, you can introduce your motion on notice.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd firstly like to thank Mr Singh, former Central Ward Councillor Glenys Monks, and also the community for notifying me of this issue. And I believe this has been going on since 2004. And former Councillor Monks provided me with some old CRMs that she obtained, which is still a burning issue for Hocking and Pearsall even since that time. And I know cooperation between a former councillor and a current councillor is much appreciated. So going into the motion, this is an issue close to home, quite literally too. It hasn't had the attention for some time, and I would like the safety concerns addressed that the community are raising, and it is time for the city to work with the state and federal governments to secure something for this dangerous intersection. I know back in those CRMs, the city promised in 2004 that a left slip lane would be done after the portion was subdivided, and this occurred, I think, between 2007 off the top of my head. And in those CRMs, there was a quote that said, "The city's future plans for the East Road portion of this intersection includes the provision of a dedicated left turn lane onto Wanneroo Road when the adjacent land is subdivided." Recently, there was also a recent RAC Risky Road survey that was put out to everyone, and that was available through the RAC website, and this was the highest intersection that received the most complaints from residents. And since the overpass has been built in the meantime, they said that this would improve East Road, but it has just delayed the traffic to the intersection now. Also, there was a change to the 467 bus route, which, because of the overpass, made it more dangerous. And now the 467 bus route has been realigned to East Road because I advocated Transperth heavily, and they understood the concerns. This was before I was a councillor. And since then, today, I'm on the other end of this, obviously as a councillor now, and I'm asking my fellow councillors to support this motion to get the process started and holding governments to account in making sure our intersections are safe for the community and meet the increased demands and needs that our Hocking and Pearsall residents are facing every day on their commute to work, school drop-offs and other daily activities. No matter who you speak to in Hocking, whether it's residents, pedestrian, car drivers or the local fish and chip shop, they tell you the same thing: fix the intersection. I'm calling on my fellow councillors to help advocate on behalf of the community by getting the city to work with Main Roads and write a letter to the Minister for Roads and Transport trying to secure an upgrade through funding to improve the safety for our residents and ratepayers, as this is a dangerous intersection and we certainly don't need to add any fatalities to the WA roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Savitton.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, I totally agree with Councillor Wright. This issue has been with us for many, many years. Now that the interchange on Ocean Reef Road is now complete, there is now a U-turn at just south of this particular intersection. This intersection has always been a problem because of the way that Wanneroo Road approaches the bend there at East Road. But certainly a left-out lane on Wanneroo Road is absolutely required. It is now a very dense suburb, Hocking and Pearsall, and people from Pearsall actually use it as well. It is time for us to look at this, and hopefully we can get some funding through the Black Spot program from Main Roads. But I am a bit cautious, though, that with Main Roads and their pressing funding, etc., when will they be able to do it? So I'm certainly in favour of writing to them again. This is a very, very dangerous bend and needs adjustment as quickly as possible. So I certainly endorse this motion on notice from Councillor Wright. Thank you.
Speakers for. Councillor Aitken.
Thank you. This intersection is very, very dangerous. I've been repeatedly told by residents how dangerous it is. With the overpass being built, the traffic speed is a lot higher than it used to be when the lights were there. The cars don't slow down. That doesn't give the residents an ability to get out safely from that intersection. The bend on the road is dangerous and the road rises up, which makes it harder to see around the corner. This is a series of fatalities waiting to happen. I've had residents complain repeatedly that they can't access the shops on the other side of the road easily because of this intersection. And it needs to be rectified, and it probably should have been foreseen before it was built. There needs to be traffic management to make that intersection safe as soon as possible. Thank you. I ask that my fellow councillors support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aitken. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Sangali.
Sorry, just a question. I'm just reading through the recommendation and I'm just wondering if we have not given it enough scope, I guess is the word, because I recall a very similar situation on Hester Avenue where we were worried about main roads not being able to fund any upgrades when we had a huge amount of traffic being redirected due to roadworks and things. And the PTA were actually able to offer some funding, although that work never went ahead, but I do know that they do have that funding streaming there. So I'm just wondering, with Councillor Wright's indulgement, whether or not we may change one of these recommendations to possibly include other funding opportunities, so we're just not limiting it to that.
Deputy Mayor?
Councillor Wright. Councillor Wright.
Yeah, taking that feedback on board, I think recommendation 3 to also write a letter to the PTA also to be included would be appropriate, I think, as well.
Well, the Minister for Transport covers both main roads.
Or any other agencies, maybe to broaden the scope, if that would work.
Just to assist, he is the Minister responsible.
It could well be the Minister responsible, but of course we could also then address it to the Treasurer as well, if that's the case, because that would cover it, if that's okay. So you're happy to incorporate that? If we were to write to the Minister for Transport and the Treasurer?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And similarly, if I can, with your indulgence, Councillor Wright, would it also then be prudent to ask administration to work with Main Roads WA or other related agencies?
Yes, definitely we can include that as well. Thank you.
If I could, just on that point, I see your point, Mr Chair, but what about extending it further federally, so to speak? I mean, the real issue is where's the money going to come from? At the end of the day, that's going to be the issue. So I don't think we should necessarily exclude federal funding agencies either.
Do I have to leave the room on that?
That's entirely up to you. Can I say, Councillor Aitken, however, if it were me...
Thanks, Chris.
What about the disclaimer attached to that?
I'll get out, mate.
Just for the record, Councillor Aitken has declared an interest and is leaving the room currently. If I could ask this question, Mr Singh, if we were to incorporate federal agencies, who would be appropriate?
Deputy Mayor, I think the way we have written the admin comments that we need to develop a solution first.
Yes.
Then we look at which program we can tap into for the funding. There are two possibilities, either state black spot or federal black spot funding. So we will try to look at those. That's why the recommendation, the way been written or amended, can give us a wider scope rather than limiting ourselves.
Yes, I think that's the right answer, I think, because there is a federal black spot and a state black spot program. So that allows the level of flexibility for administration to access as broadly as possible those funding sources. Councillor Sangali. Speakers against.
Just a point of order, sir, we're talking about the amendment now?
Oh, sorry, actually, if I could
substantive
just...
motion, please.
No, I think that's... Actually, before we go any further, my mistake. Can we ask Councillor Aitken to come back into the room, please? No, it's been incorporated into the substantive item. Well, no, it's Councillor Wright's incorporated that into the substantive item. With the agreement of the seconder as well. Sorry, Councillor Aitken, we almost forgot you out there. So I was looking at speakers against. Speakers for, I had you down, Councillor Rowe.
Happy to support this motion on notice. Just one of the things in the administration comment that particularly interested me was that Main Roads had commissioned a road safety inspection in February of this year, and I was wondering if that had come back to administration, and if possible, is there any way we can access that potentially on the elected members hub?
Mr. Singh.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, we haven't actually evaluated that report yet, and we will have to ask Main Roads how far we can release that. And if they allow us to release it, we will definitely place on the hub.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Councillor Rowe, that's... Yep. I had you down next, Councillor Baker.
Thanks, yes. I support what Councillor Wright is proposing. I agree with the amendment, which is deemed to be incorporated into the substantive motion. As with all reports, admin reports regarding any item, there's the paragraph headed with the words financial implications, and that's the one I tend to pay a lot of attention to. I appreciate, of course, that the Wanneroo Road itself is managed by the MRWA, of course, and it would seem impliedly that East Road, however, is the responsibility of the city, as I read the financial implications. In that paragraph on page 657, it states the cost estimates for any proposed intersection upgrades will be known only after a detailed analysis is undertaken, etc., obviously. And it goes on to state, any works on Wanneroo Road should be funded by MRWA, Main Roads WA, and that's on Wanneroo Road, unless these relate solely to improvements on East Road. Now, I would have thought when an intersection is upgraded or substantially changed, of course, it's very difficult to determine precisely in monetary terms who should be responsible for the total cost of doing the lot, so to speak. But why would it be the case that the Main Roads WA would not fund the works on Wanneroo Road? Why would it be the case? It says in the report that they should be funded, but why were they? What possible reasonable explanation could they have for declining to fund the works required on Wanneroo Road, please? To Mr. Singh, I think, please. Thank you.
Mr. Singh.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, look, as I said earlier, a solution has to be determined first. Then it will be up, if the solution is that all the works are contained within Wanneroo Road, then Main Road will have to make a decision where these works sit in their priority order and how they can fund it. If the works are solely within East Road, they potentially Main Road will say City of Wanneroo should fund it. So that's how this kind of can go ahead. At this stage, we are predicting that it should happen the way if all the works are contained within Wanneroo Road.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Thank you, Mr. Singh. Speakers against, Councillor Nguyen. Speaking for question. Question, certainly.
Can we ask Main Road to consider any traffic treatment into interim, given the high number of crashes, including 3 fatalities in the last 5 years?
Mr. Singh.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I think that's the conversation we will be having with Main Roads after we review the inspection report which they have commissioned. I don't think Main Road will be looking at anything interim. It has to be a solution which can work for the overall network and for that particular intersection. So that's work we'll be talking to Main Road, discussing with them and see what solution is possible.
would it be open to us to take any interim measure, given the high number of crashes in the last 5 years?
I suspect the response to that is it's doubtful, given that Main Roads controls Wanneroo Road. We would need to, A, fund whatever works were there, and B, seek their approval. And I think that would take us back to the very points that Mr Singh just mentioned. However, I don't want to put words in Mr Singh's mouth. Mr Singh?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think you answered my that particular question.
Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Miles?
Yeah, look, thank you. I do support the notice of motion put up by Councillor Wright, and it's good to hear that a previous councillor is happy to help you out. I think that's excellent news from former Councillor Monks. This was an issue when I was in a different place as well, and I have to say that Main Roads was very difficult to try and move on anything. Their argument, and they articulated extensively to me during the time, that because the intersection at Ocean Reef and Wanneroo Road was signalised, that actually broke the traffic enough for people to get in and get out. And as what was suggested by Councillor Aiken, that now there's no signalised intersection, it's just a straight through road over Ocean Reef Road from Wanneroo Road. This intersection and others, I guess, just Scenic Drive, just a little bit over the way from this, would obviously now be more at risk of those side impact crashes. And I do note administration's comment, there's been 13 crashes, 3 casualties at that particular intersection. It would be nice to understand whether they were rear enders or side impacts or anything like that. But happy to support it. It is Wanneroo Road, it is Main Roads Road, and I think from memory, and Mr Singh could probably answer the question as I finish, that the intersection and about 50 metres into East Road is actually under the control of Main Roads as well. So it'd be interesting to see how we can push them along with this intersection.
Mr Singh, are you able to provide any comments on that last point that Councillor Miles raised?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I'll have to take that on notice and confirm
you.
that. There are different arrangements for different state roads with different local authorities.
Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? Just a very brief comment from me. I think I absolutely support Councillor Wright's motion on notice. This particular intersection has been some considerable concern for a period of time. And I think the discussions previously were centred around the construction of the grade separation as to how that would improve those circumstances around East and Wanneroo Road. That now doesn't appear to have manifested itself, so it's appropriate at this point in time that we do then escalate it and seek the support of the funding bodies and the approvers in their circumstances. So I congratulate Councillor Wright for bringing this to Council. Councillor Wright, did you want to close debate?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just want to thank all the councillors tonight who have seriously added some serious value to this conversation. The reason for the motion on notice was to make sure we're taking the pressure off the budget and actually getting as much funding outside of the City of Wanneroo and actually working with our local members. And I thank Margaret Quirk as well for also contributing to those discussions. So I think it's really appropriate, and I thank councillors for adding value to that discussion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Now, Councillor Wright has closed debate, so councillors, if you could please cast your votes on this item. I can't see the... I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. And thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Wright, you're up again.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
MN02.
I'll keep this one short and sweet due to the sensitivity around East Wanneroo, and I understand the current levels of frustration and anxiety.
Actually, Councillor Wright, just before we go any further, you have a seconder for this item. Councillor
Savitton, sorry.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Wright.
This motion, I notice, aims to provide more community consultations on items around what the City of Wanneroo have control over, such as streetscapes, community facilities, open spaces and district sense of place statements, which is the theme of East Wanneroo. A CRG will bring all stakeholders to the table to help establish and maintain the East Wanneroo theme. This CRG won't replicate any existing groups like the Technical Advisory Group by the Department, but instead influence anything the City of Wanneroo has control over in the public realm, which will be outlined in the terms of references. It will also provide a forum for community members to ask questions and make sure that the process isn't an us versus them situation and that we bring the community along this journey. Councillor Miles, Councillor Savitton, Councillor Huntley and myself aim to provide the best leadership when it comes to East Wanneroo, and we all recognise the challenges and opportunities this has for our city. We also understand the limitations in what the city has control over, as most of the decisions have occurred with the West Australian Planning Commission. I hope this community reference group will achieve some great outcomes for the future of East Wanneroo region, and ask my fellow councillors to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Savitton.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, I totally agree with Councillor Wright. It is very important. East Wanneroo really started way back in the early 2000s, and it is very important at this point in time when there is a zoning change to that area that the city and this particular group constituting 4 ward councillors and the mayor and administration and also some community members work towards achieving the facilities that the city requires to service its community. And it is very important also to make sure that developer contributions are a part of this process to make sure if any major roads, etc., are funded appropriately and controlled appropriately through Department of Planning and the city. So hopefully this particular group will give guidance to that, and the desired outcomes will be achieved, especially in regard to the city. So I certainly am happy to support this motion and notice from Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Councillor Savitton. Speakers for? I'll go to speakers for first, Councillor Baker. Councillor Miles?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, I'm totally in support of the community reference group for East Wanneroo. As was stated by Councillor Wright and Savitton, this is probably the second largest urbanisation that the city is going to be controlling. And with that in mind, as it says in the report, 150,000 future residents just in the back of Wanneroo, 50,000 dwellings or more on 8,000 hectares. We are going to need to have any new residents and existing residents to help us establish a good place management of infrastructure that is required by the community, not just some sort of wish list. We need to double check to make sure that we're not going to put in place anything that may not quite fit for purpose. And I think having a CRG that will help support the information that we get here in council will obviously be able to help us make our decisions, and obviously will obviously impact the long-term financial plan going forward, because we will be able to see what's really required. We're going to have numerous amounts of precinct landowners, local structure plans, coming before administration and then obviously for council approval, and we need to make sure that we are going to be in place on the map, making sure that our community can see that we want a place where people want to live, not just a place because it is for first home buyers or just a second home. We actually want to create a really good place that it becomes a place forever where people don't want to move out of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Baker?
Question, please, sir.
Question, Councillor Baker.
My question is directed to Councillor Wright. Councillor, on page 660, towards the bottom, there's 4 dot points. The second dot point says that the proposed community reference group is proposed at this very early embryonic stage to comprise of, amongst other things, 8 community members who live or reside within the East Wanneroo District Structure Plan area. Who will appoint those 8 community members, please? Will it be the council as in elected members, or will it be just the elected members who are seconded to the proposed working group, please?
Councillor Wright.
Thank you. I think the plan is with council and council to assess the submissions that we get who want to be on the group. And the point of a range of different precincts is so we don't have an under or over representation of a certain precinct on there. So that I'd believe that would go through council and for all of us to decide.
Councillor Wright, I would assume your intention that part of this process, once it's decided this evening, would be one of the first pieces of work would be to develop a terms of reference. So that would assist in developing the framework for us to select those members of the community. That would be your intention?
Sorry, yes, I'll seek clarification on that. It was in terms of the terms of reference. It doesn't go into that level of detail yet, but it will be along the lines of all of us will get to decide that because we are a council.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. I absolutely thought that would have been your very much your intention. Councillor Nguyen.
I do have a question on that same page. It's the first point, actually. I feel somewhat left out that the proposal only includes members within the Central Ward Councillors and the Central East Ward Councillors, given this is one of the largest development within the city of Wanneroo. If other councillors that want to be involved, that are not within that ward, is that available to them?
I'm not sure. Councillor Nguyen, I'm sure you could probably speak nicely to Councillor Wright in the development of the terms of reference, and he'd probably consider your request. But Councillor Wright.
Anything is possible. The reason for the 2 Central East Ward councillors was because the East Wanneroo District Structure Plan area goes into Pinjar and Marigina, and a lot of the suburbs up that way, but the original proposal was to include the Southwest Ward in it, so there is some scope once the terms of references are created. Thank you.
I'd hate, Councillor Wright, I'd hate to think people were having a little bit of fun with you, but I'm sure that it was full of the best of intentions. Councillor Huntley, did you have a... Yep. Speaking for? Thank you.
Speaking for. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, obviously we are going to develop 8,000 hectares, and we are going to hopefully have a fantastic, phenomenal new town built with all facilities available, 2 train stations. It's going to be absolutely marvellous. But we do have to consider our wildlife that we are going to be displacing, and I would like to reassure the community that we would also be considering this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Huntley. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Sangali?
It wasn't. I was going to speak to Councillor Wright after the meeting, but I will just flag it, just with the number on the group, noting that this is a community reference group and not an internal working group. I just want to make sure the balance of community members always outweighs the members of council.
It's a very good governance point, Councillor. I'm sure that's in the detail as it's more of a fine-grained thing. Speakers against, speakers for. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Absolutely support this motion by Councillor Wright. The interest and angst over the impacts of the East Wanneroo development have been an issue on council for as long as I've been here, and I think going back about 15 years. Any forum to assist the residents and the City of Wanneroo administration is welcome, and as an objective of the city's strategic community plan is vital. There was an ex-councillor's names mentioned earlier on, and I'd like to mention another one who I know spent many, many years on this, being Diane Guys. So I know that her comment tonight would be, this is a no-brainer. Thanks, Mr Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. And as you mentioned that, I can just hear that former Councillor Guys' voice forcefully ringing in my ear on that. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor, and just very briefly, I too support Councillor Wright's initiative on this, and I think it is full of the very best of intentions to achieve the best possible future communities that we can possibly plan for. Because, councillors, what is important in all of this, it's a little known fact that we do make decisions and we do the planning for future communities. Those people who aren't currently there, they will have an expectation that we would include what they would hope to see in their communities. So I think this is a very good initiative, Councillor Wright. So, Councillor Wright, would you like to close debate?
No, thank you for everyone's contributions, and the terms of references should be coming soon, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. With that, Councillor Wright has closed debate. Councillors, if I could ask you to please cast your votes. I declare that carried unanimously. Well done, Councillor Wright. Councillor Parker, MENO 3, review of council member continuing professional development policy. Councillor Parker, do you have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Sangali. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm going to get that right eventually. I have raised this motion on notice to request Council bring to a forum for discussion and possible revision the subject of attendance by councillors to out-of-state and overseas conferences. I would like to make it very clear that I strongly support and encourage councillors attending courses, both mandatory and optional, within the Perth metro area. This assists and ensures we become better councillors and represent all ratepayers in the City of Wanneroo to the best of our abilities. The courses, educational opportunities and conferences councillors are offered and would attend locally can provide this education and information and are indispensable to all councillors. Conferences undoubtedly offer networking opportunities, sharing of new ideas and meeting other like-minded people, to name a few. However, and this is my reason for requesting the discussion, councillors need to look at alternatives as how this can be done by limiting the expenditure of our ratepayers' money. Administration and councillors continually review expenditure and work incredibly hard to present to ratepayers a managed, equitable and responsible budget with the aim to keep annual rate increases as low as possible. Identifying ways to do that in the current economic environment is extremely difficult. Councillors need to lead by example and ensure, while still improving and educating all of council by attending local or e-conferences, every effort is being made to keep costs to a minimum. I believe that as a councillor, total transparency means exactly that. Discussing this issue and then presenting the outcome of that discussion to ratepayers at a later council meeting confirms to our residents that council is transparent and is constantly working to benefit all ratepayers. I look forward to my fellow councillors' support on my motion and its outcome. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. And just before I go to Councillor Sangali, if I could just confirm, Councillor Parker, on the recommendation, this is your understanding, the consideration at a future council forum, after forum is a full stop, and then the remainder of that sentence is deleted?
Correct.
Thank you. So just for clarification, councillors, it's to be for consideration at a future council forum, because the date there was prior to the 30th of June, which, given the time frame and schedule of work that we have, would be likely unachievable. So that was Councillor Parker's initiative. So just to confirm that's been updated, and for everybody listening to the recording. Councillor Sangalli.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Parker, for bringing this motion to Council. This motion is a simple request for Council to discuss the current Council member continuing professional development policy and to consider whether there are some identified savings that could be achieved by modifying the policy through particular focus on conferences, seminars or other like opportunities held outside of Western Australia. Currently, councillor attendance at conferences, etc., is almost completely funded by the city and includes the cost of registration, travel to and from the destination, accommodation, taxi fares between accommodation and conference, and meal and beverage allowances. Whilst these opportunities provide councillors the opportunity to further their knowledge and network, the cost of attending needs to be assessed against alternative methods. If this motion is successful, the future discussion could explore the benefits or disadvantages of 1, reducing the individual allowance and a cumulative allowance, 2, attending online rather than in person where available, and 3, possibly individual councillors meeting some of this cost. I ask that fellow councillors support this motion so we can discuss the benefits of modifying this policy and its financial impact.
Thank you, Councillor Sangalli. Councillor Baker, question.
Thank you. Just a couple, I'll be very brief. This policy was reviewed by the council at its ordinary council meeting held on 15 March. That was around 50 days ago. On that date, it was agreed that this policy would be reviewed in October 2023. What material or significant change has there been since the unanimous decision of the council on 15 March this year to adopt, without any amendment, the revision that was then before the council? What is the significant material change in circumstances, please, in the last 50 days?
Councillor Parker?
I must be honest, this is an issue that I have had for many years coming into this. And I just think that with COVID, the change in the way we do things, the fact that we now have e-conferencing down to a T, we have Zoom, we have so many different alternatives, and the fact that we are going to go into a continuingly difficult financial episode stream, whatever you want to call it, for our residents, it is timely to look at that. This is not something that it's just come up with, that I have just come up with, and it's certainly not something that I haven't discussed with councillors previously. And I don't think there's a timeline or a date line to where we should be discussing this. I think that this is a prudent time to be discussing this and ensuring, I think we're becoming more and more, what we do as councillors is definitely becoming more obvious to residents. And I want to ensure that residents that we are transparent, and that is why I'm bringing this forward now. I do realise that this was discussed before, but not to this degree where I'm just looking at out of state and international. I'm honing in on that.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. And can I, just before we go to the supplementary question, as it is the case with all councillors, it is the right of an individual councillor at any time to present a motion on notice for council to consider them. And my reading of this, it is simply to refer back to a forum to have a further discussion. And it's absolutely Councillor Parker's right to have it tabled this evening. Councillor Baker?
Yes, supplementary. Just in relation to the issue, your explanation for why it was you were proposing this was because of your concerns about interstate and overseas conferences. Of course, the recommendation that you put up simply proposes a review of the entirety of the policy, not just two possible aspects of the policy. There's that aspect to it. And also, with respect, and I'll be supporting this motion, don't get me wrong, I'll have a lot to say about that shortly. The point is, all the issues you've raised, e-conferences, et cetera, COVID, et cetera, they were very much live issues just under 50 days ago, 50 calendar days. But yeah, so anyhow, look, if you want to, we could review this policy every week if you wanted to. It's up to you. If we've got the time, subject to FTE times, council costs and whatever. It's the same with all policies. You can bring it up for review every 60 days if you like. But yeah, so all right, I won't labour further until I get to speak in support of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. And just on that, I think it's Councillor Parker's right to bring it, but it's also Council's obligation to consider it. Councillor Aiken.
I just want to ask a question because the discussion seems to be about councillors' conferences and seminars outside of WA. Would that include the Mayor's attendance at conferences and seminars outside of WA? Because there is a cost to that as well to Council.
I'm assuming, and before I go to Councillor Parker, those things will all be up for discussion by all of Council. Councillor Parker.
Correct. That's what that is what this motion is about, is actually bringing all of those questions to the table and to discussing them openly, and then we can come to a discussion or just whatever on that. But yes, so everything, the discussion is going to be around everything that pertains to that.
Councillor Aiken.
As we are moving around the world a lot more, as the borders are down and that, what happens if online is not available or off-site education is not available with these seminars that we go to, and then we become locked in because Council's policy is that we can't travel? We need to be mindful of that.
Can I just say before I go back to Councillor Parker, and I'm probably interjecting a bit much myself, it's a discussion to be had at a forum, and I think actually presupposing some of those outcomes in this forum is probably not the ideal thing, because that discussion has got to be had in a more considered way. But Councillor Parker?
No, actually what you've just said, Deputy Mayor, is actually correct. These questions I do want answered, but I want them answered in the right place. And I think bringing it to a forum is that place. I could really have come back to you with about 100 at this point, but I don't think that is the right place and the right time to do it, because this motion on notice is asking for it to come back to a forum where we can have an honest, open and confidential discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Wright, I think, was next.
Question, yes. My question is to the CEO in terms of registers that are applicable to elected members. I did a bit of a browse through other metropolitan councils, and I see they have registers for conferences and training events that each councillor attends. You know, I understand that we're meeting our minimum obligations under the Local Government Act, but I think there's a lot of opportunities to introduce a lot of other registers that are applicable to councillors to provide more transparency around that. And it's in relation to this motion on notice around the conferences and training events. Have we actually got one of these on the city's website that is regularly updated? And my second question is, how often are registers updated, the ones that are applicable to council at the moment? Thank you.
Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So we have the registers that are required under the Act, and they're updated in accordance with the Act. From memory, I can recall elected members having a discussion maybe in the last 12 months about additional registers, but we do not have any council-endorsed additional registers at this point.
Question, if I
no,
can, please.
not just yet, Councillor Baker. We've got other councillors who were up before you. Councillor Rowe. Oh,
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Wright, if I can.
And just in my second question, how regularly are registers updated? Do they, as soon as someone submits something, are they straight away put on there, or is there a certain time frame that administration updates those registers?
From memory, I think the regulations require they be updated within a certain period of time, and we would follow that. Ms Smart might be able to add a little additional information in terms of the frequency.
Mr. Smart.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. So the registers that are currently on the website do vary in the requirements for updating. Some have a very specific turnaround time. It might be within a week or 14 days. Others are required to be updated annually. For example, the registrar in training needs to be updated within 2 weeks of the end of the financial year.
Councillor Rowe.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I'll be speaking in support of this motion on notice. And in terms of the sort of material or substantive changes that have happened since the policy came up for review, I can't speak for Councillor Parker, but in my mind, when I was reading this motion on notice, the inflation rate was one, and significant cost of living pressures to households. So I don't know if that was at the front and centre of your mind, Councillor Parker, but it was certainly on mine when I was reading it. I think all of us as councillors need to be conscious of the economic climate as it is and the real pressures to the operating budget as well. I think we all have to make a considered choice on whether to attend events or conferences or take up PD opportunities when they come up. And consider what the genuine benefit is for ourselves, for our fellow elected members, and then for the community as well. I'm not against a budget allocation for conference attendance and for PDs, but I think it needs to be as transparent as possible, and the benefit, the overall benefit, needs to be justified, and I'll articulate more of this at forum should this motion on notice be successful. For example, wherever possible, to prioritise online participation if it's available, and also then delegates who attend those conferences perhaps sharing the skills and the knowledge that they learn with the rest of the elected members. So if matters come before council that are relevant to those conferences, we all have that benefit of that knowledge. I can't foresee any reason to oppose this motion, because if you're supportive of changing the policy, you can articulate the reasons for doing so at forum. And if you have reservations about why the policy shouldn't change, you can articulate those and convince council members to keep the policy as is at forum. So I'm fully in support.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Councillor Nguyen.
Look, I do support this motion, but I do have a couple of questions in relation to this motion, because I guess this motion seems to stem from the concerns of travelling interstate or internationally to international conferences. Now, I don't see why we can't take it further by, if we're looking at trying to reduce costs and fees, we should look at potentially cutting other, I guess, discretionary spending, including, for example, potentially our dinners every night, because that is another cost. So I think if we were to review costs, we should review as a whole to see how much savings we can have, not just on the travelling, because I think I know this is just one part of initiative to trying to save costs, but I think we should look at even other cost-cutting measures. So I do support this, but I think we should do even more, because in the last 4 years we've got COVID. There weren't that many interstate travel opportunities. So the issue isn't really there. I know before that there may have been a lot more. So I guess my question to administration is, has the interstate travel cost changed in the last 4 years or in the last 10 years compared to now? Because I would have thought the cost of travelling hasn't been that much in the last maybe 2 years, because there weren't none.
Councillor, if I can, and I don't think it's up to administration to answer that particular question, 2 points. Number one is relevance. Raising the prospect of meals in discussion about referring something back to a council forum for discussion is not relevant to this circumstance. And the motion itself is about referring the policy back to forum. And the question, if you'd like to put that in writing to administration to have that discussion at a forum, I think would be give them a chance to have a well-researched and well-informed discussion. So the subject matter of this particular item is about referring the policy back to forum and whether or not councillors support that or not.
Yes, I guess my question in relation to the conferences itself is, what is the distinction between attending conferences interstate and within WA, leaving aside the costs? So if we were to, say, reduce the allowance itself, so a councillor is probably open to consider whichever, whether within WA or interstate. So what is the difference if we were only going to target overseas or interstate conferences?
Well, I don't, yeah, and again, this isn't for an administration to answer or respond to your question. This, if you have that question...
No, this is for the, I think, Councillor Parker, who has put forward this motion.
Because you specifically asked for administration to respond.
If administration can respond as well.
No, it's not up to administration to respond to this item. It's a motion on notice from Councillor Parker. Thank you, Councillor Nguyen. And I'm sure Councillor Parker would probably say that it's up for discussion at a forum where it can be advised or discussed in a very informed and measured way. Councillor Parker.
I'll just repeat the last 3 lines. Discussing this issue and then presenting the outcome of that discussion to ratepayers at a local council meeting. So whatever comes onto the table at the time gets discussed, and then we bring those discussions and the alternatives or whatever we've come up with to a council meeting to be transparent at the time. But all of the issues, whatever you want to discuss, can be discussed at a forum, and that is what I'm asking for, is the forum to discuss this, and I'm doing it to ensure that the transparency is there, because I'm not saying that we are going to be discussing all of this, and we really need to bring it back now and tell everybody what the outcome of that discussion was. So that is the intent of this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Parker, and I'm quite surprised it's gone to this length because I thought it was a no-brainer. But Councillor Baker.
Speaker in support, sir?
Certainly.
Thank you very much. Now, I appreciate that this particular policy was only reviewed 50 days ago, but I'm up for reviewing a review. Of course, you can review whatever policy you like, whenever you like, every day of the week. You could attend 50 forums, say nothing, and then go to the 51st and then decide to review a policy. It's up to the individual. I think it's very important that we have a frank discussion, an honest discussion, an open discussion about the scope of this policy and the potentiality for blatant rorting, simply blatant rorting, junketeering rorting. Let's be frank. Many people talk about the need to network, of course. They have to go to Sydney to network or Melbourne. They have to spend 3 days there, have to drink copious bottles of Chardonnay, long liquid lunches, but they are networking. And they make some very good friends, I'm sure. This sort of networking that involves interstate and overseas travel is perceived by most ratepayers, right or wrong, as being absolute out-and-out junketeering, rorting, snouts in the trough. Snouts in the trough.
Actually,
if you read the Local Government Act... Sorry?
Councillor Baker, I'm actually just a tad concerned. If you have any specific circumstances that you could highlight, I'd be interested to hear them, because I know from my perspective I haven't been outside of this state on council dime for at least 10 years.
Yep.
But if you have any that fit into that category in this council, I think it's appropriate that you raise it.
I think there is a perception. What I'll do is consult with the community and see if they can come up with some specific examples which they reasonably believe may involve that. And so thanks very much for that contribution, though, Mr Chair. So in a nutshell, that's the perception of the community. In the age of the internet, Skyping, etc., Zooming, you don't have to go interstate to Melbourne or Sydney or Brisbane or wherever, Alice Springs, Uluru. You don't have to go to New York or Paris or what have you. It's just absolute nonsense. It can all be done electronically. It's a shocking waste of money. And the perception of the community is, that it's just blatant electioneering, blatant junketeering and basically rorting the system. One other thing that this policy, I was struck by this policy, which I don't think the question's ever been asked, is it actually provides for ratepayers to potentially pay for university degrees for elected members. University degrees. I find that remarkable, but I'm sure there's never been a case where ratepayers' money has ever been accessed to pay for university degrees. Well, I hope not for elected members to complete a university degree or to do for example, a diploma course in whatever subject matter they're interested in doing. It seems wrong to me that the ratepayers should be paying for uni degrees and uni diplomas, certificates and what have you. Seems a very, very expensive waste of money. But anyhow, they're my observations. I look forward to the review, and we'll see if we can, as has been suggested, do a thorough review, not just in terms of interstate travel, of course. Remember that, once again, it's proposed that the whole of the policy, in its entirety, every clause, will go to a forum. And there should be some very interesting debate and discussion. I really look forward to it. Absolutely. Thank you.
I shall be very pleased to have those discussions with you, Councillor Baker. And the other thing, I think the principle's very good, because earlier on this evening we spoke about, and Councillor Wright very judiciously decided not to progress an amendment because he understood that once the policy had gone through for standing orders, there was an opportunity to almost immediately go back and review it. And it's that's a perfect example of why we can and should do these things. Are there any other comments or...
Just one question, please.
Certainly, Councillor Baker.
My question is just to the CEO. Mr CEO, you've been with the city now for, I think, over 15 years, is it? 15 years? 12? Approximately. Well, let's just say 15, just for the sake of discussion. Are you aware of a policy having been passed by the city which comes up for review within 50 days of its passage and approval by the city? Has that ever happened before? Is that highly
Actually,
unusual?
Councillor, I'm going to rule that out of order because we discussed this earlier on. It's not an administrative process, nor is it up to administration to offer an opinion. Every elected member, as part of the governing board of this organisation, has the right to bring a motion on notice whenever they feel they can and should. It's not up to administration to second guess that. It's up to the governing board. Councillor Parker has exercised that right, and it's up to the governing board to determine whether or not that's a right and just thing to do.
On a point of order, I was not seeking an opinion from the CEO. I was asking him, are there any similar historical factual scenarios that have arisen in the past?
And with respect...
That's not seeking an opinion.
And with respect, Councillor Baker, that's not a point of order.
It's a point of order.
That's not a point of order, Councillor Baker.
Well, with respect, it is.
Please quote me in the standing orders the point of order you're raising.
What you alleged that I asked of the CEO was for him to give an opinion.
That's not a point of order, Councillor.
I did not ask for him to give an opinion. I was asking him to...
That is not a point of order, Councillor. I rule that out of order.
I haven't even finished the point of order with respect. You can't make a determination until I've finished it, surely. Plain logic, surely. But that was the question I asked. Is he aware of this having happened before?
No, Councillor, you raised the point of order. I ruled it out of order because it is not a point of order. Unless you can determine for me exactly where in the standing orders you're referring to is specifically with a point of order and what that point of order number is, please.
The point of order provisions are in the Standing Orders 2008. The point of order was that you said that I was not permitted to ask the CEO for an opinion. I agree, I wasn't up, but I wasn't asking him for an opinion. I was asking him to recount over the years since he's been employed with the city, has ever been a case where a local law, which is approved on a particular day, was then up for review.
Your point of order, Councillor.
That is the question.
Your point of order, Councillor, is out of order. And I won't accept your point of order.
I won't move a motion of dissent.
And can I say, referring to the standing orders and having points of order in the standing orders doesn't sufficiently satisfy the exact point of order that you're referring to. What you were talking about was not a point of order, it was extending debate.
I was talking about facts with respect, sir.
No, it wasn't. It certainly wasn't, Councillor, and I'll have no more on that. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Miles.
Just a question. I got the impression from some of the conversations by Councillor Parker and some others that there may not have been some transparency in regard to the item coming before us last March. On the 15th of March, it was said to be transparent and all the rest of it. That policy was put out there. I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the councillors went through this policy in a forum last year before it did come to... So administration didn't just rock this up in March of this year and say, this is your policy, do you want to adopt it? It came to a forum councillors asked questions on it. There was no questions regarding it, and it came back with no amendments, as it states in the responsibility for the implementation chart at the bottom of the policy manual. So I'm just trying to understand why the word transparency has come up when it was very transparent in a forum, and it was very transparent when it was put on the agenda in March of this year for us to discuss at a briefing and also at the ordinary council meeting on the 15th of March. So I just want to understand where the transparency part of the conversation has come from, because that somewhat is putting in my mind I feel that this was just slid into the agenda without any conversation, and that's not the case.
No, you're quite right, Councillor Miles, it certainly wasn't, and as these things always happen, they are fully discussed and expanded upon by all councillors who attend those forums. Prior to them coming to a council meeting, you're absolutely right. Councillor Parker?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. No, Councillor Miles, that was not the intention at all. I believe that this council and administration are extremely transparent. The transparency that I was referring to is what will come out of the discussions at the forum. I do believe, and I think is an example of what has happened here tonight, there are going to be a few issues that do come to that forum and are laid bare on that table, and that is the transparency that I'm referring to. So I'm referring to transparency that comes from the forum that I'm asking for in this motion. So that does that clarify it?
Well, I guess the issue there is forums are not transparent.
They're confidential.
They are confidential
Strictly
meetings.
There is
So
zero
if you want to be
transparency.
transparent with this particular policy, Deputy Mayor, coming through you, you would have the discussion in this chamber, not in a forum. There's no transparency in a forum.
No, but the transparency will come in this council once we have had an opportunity to discuss what all councillors are feeling. I think there's been a couple of different opinions to what I am alluding to. So when we've had the discussion as to everything, what comes before this council, and obviously then the ratepayers, is what has come out of that. So that's the transparency that I'm alluding to. So I'm not talking about confidentiality, Councillor Baker, or anything like that. So when we do have a forum, it is confidential. We are all there around the table and are able to discuss what we don't like or what we do like or what we agree with and what we don't agree with. What the transparency is alluding to is what comes to this council at the end of that. So that we can all sit around here and say, yes, this is transparent and this is what we've all come to an agreement on.
So just to finalise on this point, are you suggesting when this was discussed in forum last year, late last year, that councillors didn't have the opportunity to talk about it, and that when it then came to the March briefing session and council meeting, that's when the first opportunity that councillors had the opportunity to talk about it? So
Absolutely. Sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah,
Are you happy
actually,
for me
yes.
to answer the question?
Yes, Councillor Parker.
In all the 7 years that I've been on council, I have never had this discussion. In all 7 years that I've been on council and have not agreed with something, that I have been able to go and ask the CEO or whatever the case might be. But I have never been in a discussion where we can put all of this on the table and not actually have to worry about anything. And that's what I want to get to. I know there's a lot of people that are going to say to me, oh, but this or that, or we don't agree, or we do agree, because this is a contentious issue. It's been something that has been going on in council for many years. But I think going forward, we all need to take responsibility for what is going forward, for what is going to happen in the future. And that is the discussion I want to have. And I don't necessarily want to have that in the open, because I feel we all have opinions and they all need to be heard confidentially so that we can come up with the best solution for our residents. And ultimately, that's what I'm looking for, is the best solution for our residents and for us as councillors to be able to raise our heads and say, you know what, we are doing the best for the residents. And we are saving you money, and we are making an effort to keep our rates as low as possible. It has never been more important to keep our rates as low as possible as going forward. Thank you, Deputy.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Baker.
Sorry, a further question to Councillor Parker, if I can, please. In order to assist with the transparency of the forum, and without in any way waiving confidentiality, would you agree that at the very least, in terms of transparency, at the very least, that the forum be recorded electronically, just like this meeting is tonight, just like briefing sessions are? I think you'd agree that that would greatly assist in the transparency in terms of what actually transpires at the forum, particularly in case, hypothetically, there's a hypothetical scenario, someone says something they didn't say and someone says they did say it. But at least that way, in terms of transparency, you'd have a recording you could fall back on. That would still be a confidential recording, but it would still nonetheless be a way of assisting transparency. Would you support the idea of the forum being recorded, please?
Councillor Parker, I don't think it's appropriate that you actually should be put on the place, put on the spot to answer that question. Because Councillor Baker, you will be aware that forums are all confidential.
Unless otherwise resolved by the group.
And forums are not a decision-making environment, Councillor. No. You will also be aware of that.
Absolutely. It's got nothing to do with what I just said, though.
Thank you, Councillor. No, councillors, actually, if councillors might put a motion to have this motion be put, Councillor Sangalli, second, and Councillor Rowe. So that's a procedural motion that we put this item. No. Okay, councillors, this is on a procedural motion just to decide to have the motion put. If you cast your votes, please. That's 12 in favour, 1 against, and the objection against is again Councillor Nguyen. With that, councillors will accept that the motion has been Councillor, that's now been put and it's been decided. Councillor. I'll call you to attention on standing orders to behave appropriately in this forum. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just responding to your...
No, you're not responding, councillor. You're interjecting. The motion's been put. It was a procedural motion. There is no further debate. Councillor Parker, did you want to close that debate so as we can have that motion put, please?
Happy to go ahead.
Thank you. Councillors, now we now go to the substantive motion. So if you could please register your votes. I declare that carried 12-1 with the opposing motion being Councillor Nguyen. Now with that, councillors, we move on to item 10, urgent business. There is nil. Item 11 is confidential. And council, we will move into confidential session to discuss item CR 010522 under the terms of the Local Government Act 1995, section 5.232. Looking for a mover, Councillor Miles, seconded Councillor Savitton. Councillors, if you can, please cast your votes to go into confidential session. That's 12-1, and again, Councillor Nguyen votes against going into confidential session. Thank you, councillors. I'll read now the recommendation, and the recommendation is, councillors? Recommendation is that council supports the Chief Executive Officer's approach to the staffing matter as discussed in the report. That was moved Councillor Rose, seconded Councillor Savitan, and that was carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move to item 12, which is date of the next meeting. Council members' briefing session is to be held Tuesday the 7th of June 2022 at 6 p.m. Item 13, closure. I declare the meeting closed at 8:37 p.m. Thank you.